Hey there folks, it's Arlyeon with this week's episode of Crit Hit Reviews. Today I'll be talking about Frozenbyte's rather expansive roguelike Has-Been Heroes. Stay tuned as we see if this particular title manages to bring glory to its titular heroes or if it'll leave you wishing you had been doing something else. So to begin, the game doesn't waste any time introducing the player to the premise of the game, which, as it turns out, is to briskly jog a pair of young princesses to school alongside a pair of legendary heroes who are, well, long past their prime, and a rogue who got pulled into these shenanigans. Now, the complication in this situation, and the reason that legendary adventures are needed, comes with the whole countryside being absolutely overrun with murderous undead. Beyond that introduction, however, there isn't too much to the story itself. Characters do have specific bits of banter when you interact with shopkeepers, rest areas, or the like, but it's mostly fluff. In fact, the biggest chunk of story you'll end up stumbling into beyond the intro is the nifty little plot twist that occurs, I believe, either at your 6th or 7th successful clear. But we'll get more on that later. So, when it comes to the overall game itself, Has-Been Heroes is a rather curious beast, emphasizing a rather strategic look at the roguelike genre. The basic formula starts simple enough, giving you control of 3 heroes, a rogue that hits thrice, a caster that hits twice, and a heavy-hitting warrior. But even that simple premise becomes part of the game's nuance, as all of your various enemies have a number of defense points that you need to match to put them into a vulnerable state to deal optimal damage, and which lowers that creature's defense by 1. Since, guess what, their defense does replenish after you successfully hit them. On the other hand, if you overshoot the amount of hits needed to break that enemy's defense, you'll be dealing those extra hits at reduced damage and knock them back. Turn the game to a weird bit of, well, on-the-fly mathing. And, well, when you're not solving equations by just introducing a fireball to a creature's face. That's not the only quirk to the game's difficulty, however, as another comes in its map and travel system. See, each of the game's areas are composed of a large number of unknown tiles which only let you know what they contain when you're adjacent. Larger ones tend to be rewards, smaller ones are either fights or safe. Given you're running around blind, a large part of the game ends up being trying to find the optimal path to get as much gold and keys for chests as possible, without backtracking. See, backtracking consumes one of your candles, resources you do occasionally get from chests or fights, but which you only start with one of. These candles can be used to pray at a shrine, but they're also consumed when you backtrack through a path you've already taken, and if you backtrack through an area you've been without a candle, it instantly game's over. That said, given that your heroes gain in strength not by leveling, but also by acquiring relics from chests and vendors, both for the inherent bonuses those items give, as well as a passive bonus to their health for each one they acquire, backtracking tends to happen. And yes, you can purchase map items that let you know where certain type of vendors or locations are, but each one is counted as relic, and their acquisition means one of your precious, limited, relic slots on a hero are taken up by what is effectively dead weight. Not that it's avoidable to acquire dead weight relics on characters the first time you encounter them, since if you haven't picked up a relic in a playthrough before, you don't actually get to find out what it does or if it'll be useful for the character acquiring it until after you pick it up. And you can't swap relics between characters or get rid of them. I tried! Lord, did I try! That said, the relics aren't the only way to empower your characters. As I mentioned earlier, spells are a fairly effective way for bypassing defense. They're just problematically acquired from rather expensive vendors who provide one-use-only elementally themed gachapon machines. That's right, your spell choice and ultimate fate is determined by the virtual equivalent of a pachinko machine. Which is sort of a shame given that the magic in Has-Been Heroes is actually pretty damn awesome. And that's because not only is there a wide variety of them with neat effects, the fact that there's a water, wind, lightning, ice, fire, and poison magic element that all have interactions with each other is sweet. Douse an enemy with water, you can hit him with fire to make it into scalding steam and slow him down. You can hit him with lightning to deal double damage, or water to make puddles that will douse other enemies who pass through them, and which you can also fill with poison to make the puddles poisonous and poison everyone who walks through it, or you can freeze him and it'll last longer than normal. Like, it's actually pretty spiffy, but whether you get a spell that's ultimately useful to you is... yeah, that's a bit of a problematic issue, and as opposed to the relics where you frequently end up with choices for what you can actually pick up without spending money, yeah, you don't get to do that with magic. It's heartbreaking. This actually becomes more of an issue in later runs of the game, where you'll start meeting ghostly enemies and bosses who you actually need certain spells to be able to hit them. Read, you will die a slow and awful death by attrition if you don't have some way of making them corporeal. But hey, at least your deaths will allow you to cash in all the souls of the undead you waded through to unlock more unknown spells and relics to trip you up. I mean, some of them are super awesome and game-breaking when you get them, it's just getting to that point. But speaking of runs, at first the game is fairly brief to run through, as you're granted 3 characters and a need to tackle the boss. That's it. That said, with every successful clear of the Great Ghoul you manage, you unlock an additional character, or variant in the rogue's case, and the game grows larger by an additional area. So whilst at first you can likely get through a run in less than 20 minutes, by the time you've cleared a game enough that you actually reach the final area, the academy where you're bringing the princesses, it can take well over an hour per run. Even upwards of, I think my longest run took me 2 hours, but I did not get good magic that run. And if you're a completionist, you are in for quite the ride. See, once you unlock the final area, each clear of it allows you to poke an ominous skeleton chest to unlock a more powerful variant of one of your unlocked heroes, which is probably needed for the ending. I still haven't seen the ending, and I've beaten the game something like 16 times now. That said, if you do want a more bite-sized experience, there are the challenges, which are neat bite-sized battles, which all have rather particular modifiers to them, requiring a fair amount of strategizing and knowledge to complete each. So more or less, each of these challenges sort of plays out like a much smaller, condensed puzzle. A successful completion of these unlocks a young hero variant of the main characters, which are not only fairly powerful in their own right, but also provide access to the Sky Temple areas in the main game should you have a full party of young heroes. Now, these areas are more or less ways to enjoy a shorter game, but they are quite frequently more challenging, serving as a neat change of pace. There's also apparently an epic quest mode unlocked for completing all the Sky Temples as every young hero like 3 times, where you get to play as the Trine characters, but I haven't managed that yet, and I'm 60 hours into the game. Moving on, I will say that I do enjoy Has-Been Heroes sound effects and soundtrack, though it wasn't the sort of thing that absolutely wowed me. I am sort of fond of the narrator's voice though, and I don't mind the fact that the various characters only have sound effects instead of spoken dialogue. It's actually pretty charming. Visually, Has-Been Heroes is nice to look at, with the character designs being interesting, and the upgrades to your characters, their variants, actually providing different visible elements to the characters and not just being recolors. Also, the vast array of different creature types provides a nice assortment of wonky skeletons, zombies, and ghosts to smash apart. It also helps that the game has a fairly easy to navigate UI, which is really useful given the way the combat works in it. The spell and elemental effect animations are also pretty entertaining, which helps given how often you'll be spamming those in a mad attempt to save your butt. Oof. So first of all, I want to get something clear here. I do like Has-Been Heroes. That said, I am not entirely sure if it isn't some sort of video game equivalent to Stockholm Syndrome at this point. if only because there's distinctly moments where I feel the game made some very punishing and sometimes unfun decisions. And really key amongst those was both just how lengthy the game could feel in tandem with how disempowered and random things felt. Nothing ever felt quite as bad as encountering bosses or enemies that I had no realistic way to fight, simply because I didn't have the type of magic to be able to confront it, and the inability to know if I was screwing over a character by equipping an unknown relic, or gambling on spells is something that I'm not fond of to this day. As I continue to sink hours into the game and learn what some of these items did, it ultimately does lead to a far more consistent experience, and I enjoyed discovering the new characters, seeing their little bits of fluff dialogue, and acquiring their variants. But even at this point, those design decisions stick out heavily in my mind. Ultimately, it's for that decision that I'd likely rate this game as a fumble, as whilst I personally enjoy it, and view that there is an absolute mountain of content to be done in the game, if you're not a fan of roguelikes or the loss of progress that's inherent with them, this might not resonate with you as a game. Anyways, this sums up my review for Has Been Heroes. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share about the game from what you've seen or what I've said, feel free to leave a comment down below. Other than that, if you'd like to see some of my more indie game reviews or the indie developer interviews, feel free to hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon to get a notification when I work on something new. Anyways, this has been Arlyeon, and I will catch you fine folks next time. See you and take care.